Hey everybody, Jason here from Murideo. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. We're going to be doing something kind of fun today. We're going to revisit this nice Hisense 55A H9G LED LCD TV that I worked on back in August. And the reason for the revisit, the first video that we did on this TV, since then, we put a lot of hours on the TV. So we definitely want to check it, see if it's drifted, make sure all the colors are still correct and things like that. But also the big buzz about this TV a few months ago, right around holidays, it seems like there was a major firmware update to it. So we did find some kind of quirky things with this TV when I worked on it back in August. So hopefully the firmware update that just happened maybe fixes some of these things. I don't know. You guys are going to go on this journey with me to see what happened. As we go through the presentation today and we calibrate this TV or recalibrate this TV, just keep in mind that the first video will be a lot better for you to watch first before you watch this video. So if you haven't seen the first video on calibrating this TV, that's where we go through and I show you how I set all the equipment up and kind of give an introduction to CalMan and that kind of thing. We're not going to do that today because it is just a revisit. So my recommendation for you, if you haven't seen the first video, is to watch that first video before you watch this video. If you're already on watching this one now, totally cool. Feel free to hang out. But a lot of the context and stuff might not make sense unless you saw the first video. So feel free to check out that first video. It's on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search for Murideo. You should see it right away. And from there, I think that's all the housekeeping we need to do. I do have Tom Devine with me, kind of watching the chat box and stuff. I'll keep an eye on the question box and chat box myself. Between the two of us, we'll get your questions answered as you have them throughout the presentation. Don't be shy. Feel free to type those questions into the questions box, and we'll get to those as best as we can. One other thing I want to address, just because this was a huge thing in the comments on the last video, and something that's just sort of a bit of pet peeve of mine for many years now. A lot of people in the first video were asking for the settings I came up with after the calibration. And I cannot stress this enough, guys. If you're here to just copy down settings that I come up with after the calibration, I don't think this is the right video for you. This video is to show you how to do it and what to expect and what to look for in test patterns and things like that. So this is more of an instructional thing. There are plenty of other resources out there if you want to just take settings and try them on your own TV. And feel free, there's forums out there. There's lots of other websites that do reviews and things like that. If you're looking for settings, go have fun with that, but this is going to be an educational video on how to do things, what to look for, and we're really going to see if this TV's made any improvements since the last time we visited it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn off this camera, and we're going to switch over to the camera that's facing the television. And Tom, if you at any point, if I pick the wrong camera or something, feel free to just let me know. So now you guys should see the TV, and now you guys should see my screen with CalMan on it. It does look like that's all set up and ready to go. Okay, cool. So a couple things just to kind of prep you for what's going on so far. The first time we saw this TV, I did make a profile with the meters I was using. I was using the Jetty 1511 as my reference, spectroradiometer, and then using the Klein K10A colorimeter, which is this meter that you can see on the screen right now. I've already done the profiling. I've already got that set up. I've already got my Murideo set up. Again, guys, if you want some more context on how to get started on the calibration and what to do beforehand, feel free, go back and watch that first video and you'll see lots of good information. So one thing I do want to mention too is when we did calibrate this TV the first time, it actually went pretty well. As I mentioned before, we did find some kind of quirky things with some of the controls. Maybe the firmware update since then has fixed that. When we first worked on the TV the first time, it was brand new out of the box. It was fresh. I think it had 5 hours on it, and now we're up to around 140 hours or so. So any kind of break-in time or drift, if it did any of that, we're gonna see it today. So we're gonna jump straight into CalMan here. Again, all my meters are connected. My generator's connected. We've got green lights here at the top. We're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. So on this screen right here, I might want to go through, if I was doing this in a live environment with a client or even at my own home, I might go through and type in all of my old settings that I came up with the first time, just to kind of compare them at the end. I'm not going to do that here just to save some time, but that's something that you can do. If this TV is fresh out of the box, it might be a good idea to go through and check picture modes and those types of things. If I remember correctly, let's test my memory here. I think we calibrated this TV on theater night last time. So let's just take a quick look at the picture mode, and yet we're still in theater night. So this is going to be a really good comparison because we calibrated it in theater night all those months ago and all those hours ago. Now we're going to take some measurements in theater night to see if it's drifted at all. So in CalMan here, I'm just going to document the picture mode that we're working in, just so I remember for next time. And depending on how we go today, guys, with time, and if you have any questions or if you want to see it, we may go through too. I did have this request from the first video about doing a day mode. In the first video, we did a night mode because the room was dark and things like that. So somebody had a specific question about, what would you do differently in a day mode? So if we have some time towards the end here, we'll look at some things for day mode, and I'll kind of clue you in on some of the things that might be different and things to look for your day mode. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, since we're in theater night, that was the mode we calibrated last time. And real quick, before I get too deep into this, I'm going to turn off my studio light here. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and measure theater night, and let's see how it looks. Let's see if anything happened since last time. Okay, so the grayscale looks fairly tight. There is a little bit of blue throughout the grayscale, but not the end of the world. It does look like some of the primary and secondary colors are a little off, but it's not too bad. There's something weird going on right here at about 80%, where there's this big dip right here, and I'm not sure what might be causing that. We'll have to investigate. So taking a look here again, if you didn't see this before, a little bit of blue in the grayscale. There is a little bit of a dip right here at 80%. Not sure what's going on there, but we'll figure that out. The luminance, aka the gamma curve, still looks pretty tight. Maybe we can tighten it up a little bit more. We'll have to see. The primary and secondary colors look pretty good. We might be able to make some improvements here. I remember the first time we calibrated this guy back in August, there was a lot of quirkiness with the color management system and with the 10-point white balance adjustment, or maybe it was a 20. We'll take a look and see here pretty soon. But those were very quirky, and I believe that we kind of left those alone for the most part during the first session. So if the firmware update has fixed some of those controls, we might be able to make some really major improvements here. So if we take a look at the graph, the CIE chart on the right side of the screen, we can see green's a little undersaturated, yellow's a little too red, red's a little too oversaturated, magenta's a little bit too blue, blue's a tad undersaturated, and cyan's pretty much bang on. If anything, it might be a little bit blue. Now, if we look at how bright each color is compared to how bright it should be, the Gamut Luminance graph down here will tell us that information. Remember, color works in 3 dimensions, and on the CIE chart, we're only looking at it in 2 dimensions. So to see that 3rd dimension, which is how bright the color is, we're going to look down here in the Gamut Luminance chart, the bar graph down at the bottom. So red's a little dark. Of course, 0 is the reference line here. So red's a little dark, green's a little dark, blue's a tad bright, cyan's a tad dark, magenta's a little dark, and yellow's a little bright as well. So not a ton of work to do here. I think the biggest thing that we're really going to notice here, if anything, is if we can tighten things up with some better controls. And by the way, too, just in case anybody is wondering, the firmware has been updated on this one. I did check it this morning just in case there were any last-minute firmware changes that may have happened, in the last 24 hours, and there wasn't. So let me just scroll down here, and so you guys can see exactly which version of firmware is on this unit here. You kind of have to dig for it. It's a little tough to find, but it's going to be under the device preferences menu and then under help, which is kind of strange. It's usually somewhere else, but that's okay. We're going to go to system message, and we're going to check down here the software version. The last 5 digits are what we're really worried about here, and that's K1016. And that does seem to be the latest, and that's what a lot of people were reporting on the forums and whatnot. So we're definitely up to date here. So let's switch back over to HDMI 1 so we can get the test pattern generator back on the screen, and then we can dig into it and start to take some measurements here. Okay, so we know our starting point. We'll go through a couple of these. Some of these pages we might skip because we already know some of this information. So for example, step 1 here for the correlated color temperature, which is also, you also may have heard before the term color temperature, where color is measured in a color temperature, and it's going to have a Kelvin attached to it. So 6500 Kelvin is kind of a roundabout, very close to our target. It's just to give us a rough idea, especially on this page, to make sure, we really want to make sure the color temperature is not way too cool or way too warm. We just want to make sure that it's still roughly around 6500 Kelvin. We'll get a little more detailed in the white balance page. The 6500 Kelvin is sort of a broad stroke, but the gamma on step 2 here, the gamma, again, this is a darker room. We're going to keep that gamma target at a 2.4. So I'll take a measurement here to see if we're still close to about 6500, which I think we will be, and we'll still make sure that we're still close to about a 2.4 on the gamma. Just one thing I do want to fix really quick, the target is currently set for a gamma point of 2.2. We're going to go into the CalMan settings and we're going to change that target to a 2.4. Now we have the correct target to aim for this nice dark room that we're in. So let's do a quick read series and let's see if we're still roughly at 6500 Kelvin and roughly at about a 2.4 gamma. Okay, not bad. We're about 6800 Kelvin. Of course, this is only 2 samples at 60 and 100. Again, this is just a broad stroke to see how close we are. You know, the bar graph, if it jumped way up here or it's way down here, then we know there's some other issues. We might have to try different color temperatures. The gamma is about a 2.5. Again, just 2 samples here. On the brighter side of the grayscale, where it took the brightest sample at 100%, it's right on 2.4. At 60%, which is just above middle gray, we're about closer to like a 2.5, 2.6 almost. So if you average those two together, it comes out to about a 2.5. We will see on the gamma page a little bit later how linear the gamma is throughout the entire grayscale. Hopefully it's nice and flat. We'll have to see. But that's a good starting point. It looks like not a ton has changed since last time we saw this TV. So we know the white point. I think we're using, let's double check this. I think we were using mid-low, if I'm not mistaken, on the color temperature. Let me just double check that while we're here. Again, we are still in theater night. And if we go under calibration settings, it's either under, I'm trying to remember exactly where they buried that. Let's look under advanced, and there we go. Color temperature is mid-low. So just for giggles, if you wanted to see an example of what not to do, actually you can see this in the camera very, very well. Mid-low being very close to our reference white point. Again, I mentioned this on the first video. The camera that I'm using here, and really no cameras out there, can do what our eyes can do. So there might be some changes that you see in the camera that seem very subtle, whereas with my eyeballs being here right in front of the TV in a nice dark room with no other light in the room other than my laptop screen, it's a big difference. So this is one of those examples where you actually can see a big difference in the camera. So if we take the color temperature from mid-low up to high, you can see a pretty significant change in the white, and now it's a very bluish white. So just as an example, if we were on that previous page in CalMan and you're either calibrating a TV from scratch or you're revisiting it like we are here with this Hisense, watch what happens to this bar graph. We go from roughly 6,500 to about 7,000 Kelvin, and now we're somewhere in the 14,000 range. So if anything is going to be different here, it's going to be very, very obvious. Again, the goal here is to get as close to that yellow line as possible. And by using the mid-low color temperature, which we white balanced last time, we're still pretty close, which is kind of nice. So let's pop this back over to mid-low, so we're not causing too much work for ourselves here. Now, could I white balance high? Probably. If there's enough range in the controls, I might be able to take out enough blue to balance it out. But why do more work than what's necessary, right? So we're going to start with the one that's closest, and we're going to just go from there. So the other thing I want to make sure here too is that the color space is still roughly close. It was when we did our pre-reading back here a couple of pages ago, but this TV too, don't forget, did have a few different color space options. So I just want to take a moment to revisit those to see if anything major has changed. So as I look in the TV, let's dig into the menu here and let's see where any color space options might be. Let's see, I think last time we found, yep, here we go. We have auto and native. Now auto should map out pretty close. We saw that on the pre-calibration page. Let's read native just to see it. Actually, let's see if you guys can see this on the camera. This would be a good test to tell. We might be able to see a big jump in the skin tones when we switch from native to auto. And if you remember from last time, native had way too big of a color gamut. Everything was way oversaturated. And that's probably still the case, but again, we don't assume anything when we are testing and measuring and calibrating. We have to see for ourselves. So as I'm looking at the TV, I can certainly tell in native The gentleman in the upper left corner, again, I don't know how well this is turning out on the screen for you, but he looks very, very orange. When we go down to auto, he does look a bit normal again, and so does everybody for that matter. Just for giggles though, let's take the native color gamut here. Also, the girl in the middle, her red dress gets really red, and we lose a lot of wrinkles and details in the dress. So there's a lot going on here and a lot of bad things that come with having too much color in the picture. So let's just take a quick measurement of native. I'm curious, let's see if it's still way, way, way off like it was back in August. Back in August, I do remember too, especially the green was like off the charts. So as we look at it now, it does look like it's a little more subdued and a little bit better controlled versus back in August. The color triangle is still way too big, which might work for HDR content, but right now we're working on SDR. So if we look at SDR content with this big of a color gamut, that's where you get things like, you know, orangish skin tones and losing details in color and those types of things. Plus also too, just, you know, colors in nature and things, they just kind of look fake and cartoony, and it's something that you want to avoid when you're going for accuracy. So let's go back into the advanced settings here, and let's switch the color space back to auto. I'll just give it a quick measure to be safe, and I have a feeling it's going to be exactly like it was in the pre-calibration page at the very beginning of the session, but let's double check to be safe. There's our white point, again, little too blue, but we saw that in the first graph, and everything looks exactly the same as it did in the pre-calibration read. So we're going to continue to use theater night as the SDR mode. We're going to use the mid-low color temperature for our white point, and we're going to use auto for the color space. Good starting point. Oh, and 2.4 for the gamma. Let's just double check too to make sure that's still labeled 2.4. Probably is, but again, always want to check. And gamma is still, yes, gamma is still set at 2.4. Okay, excellent. You know, the funny thing that's tripping me out about this TV, and you guys, if you've worked on these before, you'll probably agree with me. A couple weeks ago, we did a webinar on calibrating a video wall with a couple of Sony displays, and the Sony display and the Hisense both use the Android operating system. So luckily, my memory is still a bit fresh on the Android system. But if you worked on Sony's before or played in the Sony menu, you'll notice on these Hisense TVs, this menu is exactly the same. So the learning curve between the two is not so big. So this page, we're going to disable all the auto features. They still should be turned off from last time. I may have turned something back on. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. So let's go through and double check. Motion enhancement is off. Good. Motion clearness is off. These are the types of things that people will complain about when they are describing, you know, the soap opera effect, or they'll say things like, the movie looks like it was shot on a video camera. The motion's making me seasick. You know, we've heard all these things over the years about motion enhancement and motion interpolation. So those are still turned off. Noise reduction is still off. Digital noise reduction is off. Active contrast is off. And content type auto detection, I believe that's for the TV notifying you from HDR to SDR, depending on the content that you're watching. So that's all good. And then of course at the bottom here, the color space is auto. There was also some adjustments for the local dimming, and that was under the backlight settings, if I remember correctly. Yep, all the way up here at the top, we go to the backlight menu. The local dimming's on medium, which we had from last time. If I remember from last time, and we'll double check this as well. If I remember from last time, having the local dimming off wasn't so good. The blacks looked kind of gray and just, you know, wasn't great. Local dimming low made a small improvement. Medium made a really nice improvement. And then the difference between medium high didn't seem to make any improvement. And I've seen this a lot on a lot of TVs. This is fairly common. So we're most likely going to stick with medium. The backlight we had fairly low at about 25. Remember, dark room, you know, you don't want to have it so bright that it hurts. We're going to aim for probably a little over 100 nits. Remember, the reference is 100, but again, that's dark, completely dark studio environment. I've got a laptop in here. I've got a little bit of light leaking under the door that comes into this room. So, you know, we might go a little bit higher than 100 nits. No big deal, but we left it at 25 last time. One thing I have to mention, the automatic light sensor, this is part of energy savings. Anything that you see in any TV, regardless of the brand, make, model, whatever, we want to make sure that the energy saving stuff is turned off. We want to make sure that things like the ambient light sensor is turned off. This can wreak havoc when you're trying to calibrate a TV and take readings when the ambient light sensor is trying to adjust the TV on the fly. So make sure these things are turned off. They do more harm than good anyway, and especially the same thing with the energy savings, which I believe in this TV was directly correlated to the picture mode. So if we look in here, yep, there is an energy savings picture mode. And we saw last time, and we see on every other TV out there, as soon as you turn on that energy savings mode, you lose, half your light output, sometimes even more. So all that stuff is still turned off. All those settings that we had in those positions are still there. So no need to spend a lot of time on this page. Okay, let's see what's next. And actually, while I'm thinking about this, I'm gonna turn down the laptop screen. It's a bit bright right now. Okay, so again, we had the backlight about 25. I don't remember exactly how bright that made the TV last time, but let's just take a quick reading here. Let's see how bright it is with the backlight at 25. We're about 140. Okay, not bad. Again, 100 is reference for SDR in a completely dark environment, a reference environment, if you will. 140 might be a little bright for that type of environment, but if you're in a home with a little bit of ambient light, or like I said, this room I'm in now, I do have my laptop screen. I do have a smaller screen over to the right, just watching or monitoring the camera in case I bump it or something. And again, there's a little bit of light coming through the bottom of the door here. So 140 should be good. I'm actually curious. I like to do this with a lot of TVs. I like to see how fast it can go. You get into a car and let's floor it. Let's see how fast it can go. So I'm going to crank up the backlight here. This is just sheer curiosity on my part. I do remember on this TV, it is a quantum dot backlight, so it was able to get pretty bright last time. But let's see. Let's floor it and just check it out. Backlight's at about 70, 80, 90, and then 100. So if we really, really wanted to make this TV bright, we definitely can. And we were coming in over 500 nits, which is really crazy. I mean, that was completely unheard of a few years ago. But you might be saying, Jason, why on earth would you want the TV that bright? Well, remember, guys, when you're calibrating for the room and the environment that the TV is in. And if I'm working on a TV and we're in a condo downtown up in the top floor and there's windows everywhere and there's lots and lots of light in that room, then yeah, I might go this aggressive and go with 530 nits. That might cause other things on the back end. When you're pushing the TV that hard, it might be hard to dial in some of the other adjustments. But if you needed this thing to scream, it absolutely can. So think about, homes that you might see, or maybe your own home where you have lots of windows and no curtains and really no light control. If we were going to do a day mode in that extreme type of environment, then yeah, I might go 530 nits. But in this environment, let's crank it back down. Let's be a little more realistic, back in that maybe 100 to maybe 150 range. And that puts us right back down at about 25 or so. Even if I wanted to go just a smidge brighter, maybe let's measure it at 30 here and see how bright that is. And with the backlight at 30, drum roll please, we are at about 160. Okay, not too bad. Again, might be slightly on the bright side for a really dark room, but that's okay. We're just going to go ahead and roll with it. One thing I did notice too, and this happened last time, I wasn't sure if the firmware was going to fix this or do anything about it or not, and it didn't. You will notice that every time I go to take a reading on this TV, I exit the menu first. Having any part of the menu on the screen, even though it's off to the right, like you see right now, does affect the readings. We do see this on a lot of different TVs. So one piece of advice I can give you, if you're new at this, or maybe you're experimenting for the first time, take some readings with the menu on the screen, take some readings with the menu off the screen. If there's a difference, that means you cannot trust the readings when the menu's on the screen. Because think about it, guys, you don't watch TV with the menu on the screen. So why would you make your adjustments with the menu on the screen? So again, just a little bit of a piece of advice there. If you're getting different readings with the menu off or on the screen, make sure you're taking those readings with the menu completely exited like we are now. Okay, we're about 160, that's fine. Let's go ahead and go to the next page. Here we're going to check brightness and contrast. I'm going to predict that these are exactly the same as we left them. They might not be though, and we have to check. So the first one I'm going to look at is the contrast pattern. And just like all of the other times that we do these calibration videos, I don't know how well this will turn up in the camera, but I'm looking at the monitor that the camera's hooked up to right now, and you actually can see quite a bit of boxes. One thing I am noticing though, and I actually can see this in the camera, this is different than back in August. Look at the first 3 or 4 boxes in the upper left corner. So level 246, 247, 248, 249, and I can still see a little bit in 250. Guys, those boxes are kind of green. They're kind of yellowish green, and it doesn't matter what angle I move my head, around the center of the screen, those boxes are not right. The middle boxes like 234, 236, and then of course the bottom row, those are all very gray and very easy to see. So that looks good. So what am I going to do to fix this? My first inclination is to turn the contrast down a little bit. With the contrast being up, we might have some different artifacts. This particular artifact we refer to as a color shift. So this is no good. If we were to leave the TV like this, let's say that later this afternoon I'm watching maybe Planet Earth, and it's one of the snow episodes or Antarctica episodes, or maybe I'm watching hockey or something. Those brighter levels of white are all going to be kind of green, and it's going to look really, really bad on screen. So that's something that we want to fix right away, and let's test the contrast theory to see if that's what's causing it. So right now the contrast is at 43. I believe it was 50 from the factory. I don't want to push the reset button and wipe out everything in case that is what it was, but regardless of where it was from the factory, I still need to turn it down a little bit. So I'm going to take the contrast control, and I'm going to watch those first 4 boxes with my eyes, and I'm going to see if the yellowish greenish kind of tint goes away. Oh, wow. Could you guys see that with one click? 43, we've got some yellow green going on. 42, boom, no more green. Let's go down to 41 just to see if there's any more improvement. And yeah, there was a pretty big change. This is interesting. Now, let's go down. I want to see how big of a change we're talking here. So as I'm looking at this with my eyes, 36 to 37, it looks like it got a little bit brighter. 37 to 38, again, a little brighter. 38 to 39, a little brighter. 39 to 40, they got a little bluer and a little brighter. 41, 42. Now at 42, we're starting to see the green. And of course, it's very, very prevalent at 43. And as we go up, it's just probably, oh wow, as we go up, it does a lot of weird things. At 44, still a little green. At 45, they turn kind of blue. At 46, I'm starting to see some kind of purple, almost pink. And at 47, I'm starting to really clip the signal pretty bad. So I have a feeling we're going to be down close to about 40. And I do believe 39 gave me a fairly neutral gray. And I can still see, actually 38 looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to exit the menu because I want to make sure I can still see as many boxes as possible. And with my eyes, I can see up to about 253 or so, which is very good. Remember guys, the goal here is to see at least 235, which is right behind the meter right now. So the middle box is 234, 235, 236. We should at least see 235 and 236. If we can see above 236, that's good. That's just free contrast. There are some times where you might have a reflection off of a football jersey, or a reflection off water, or some really, really bright highlight that might just be on the screen for a second. And if that's the case, I do want to see it. So being able to see above 235 is just free contrast. It's free headroom. Go ahead and do that if you can. Some TVs completely cut the signal off at 235. It sees a video signal coming in and it says, remember guys, the legal range for video is 16 to 235. So some TVs, if it sees a video signal coming in, it chops everything off right after 235, and there's no boxes across the top. But in this case, with the Hisense, we're able to turn the contrast down a little bit, get rid of that nasty color shift, get rid of any clipping all the way up to 253, 254. That looks pretty good. Okay, now on the black level, on the brightness, the first time we ended up at like 54 or so, which sounds like it's about 4 clicks higher than factory. Factory on this one was most likely 50. So let's take a look here and see if anything has changed with the black level. Now I did turn the contrast down just a little bit, so the black level might be a little low now, but we'll have to see. So let's go ahead and fire up the brightness pattern, aka black level pattern. And let's find the brightness control. Yep, right here in the main menu where it should be. And we are at 54. So I don't know how many clicks it's going to take to see all of the boxes I need to see. And the way it's showing up on camera right now, wow, it's going to be tough to see this on camera, guys. What I want to see here is all of the boxes along the top row. So you'll notice the first box starts with number 17. The last box is number 26. So I want to at least see 17, and I can't right now. The darkest box that I can make out with my eyes is right about 19. So I'm gonna probably have to bring the black level up just a little bit to squeeze out 18 and 17. Now there's kind of a balance here you have to be aware of. If I turn the brightness up to, let's say, 60, and now all of a sudden I can see the boxes, that's great, right? But what you might not see in the camera, and I don't think you will be able to, I'll go to an extreme just so you can really see it. If we turn the black level up or the brightness up too high, now the background is gray. The background is supposed to be black. So what happens when you're looking at something that's supposed to be black and it's really a dark gray or even a light gray? Think of a black t-shirt that you might own or black jeans, and you've washed them over and over and over again. They start to look kind of gray, and that's where we kind of get the term washed out, right? So if I turn the brightness way up and I can see 17 finally, but now the background is super gray, that might not be the best move, because you're squeaking out that darkest shadow that might be in the movie or the TV show or the video game or whatever, but the entire picture looks washed out. So like, was that worth it? And a lot of times it's not. So if I have to sacrifice 17 to get better dynamic range and better blacks out of the TV, that's what I'm going to do. So let's see how low we can go here before 17 kind of goes away. Now the background is still very gray. I can still see the boxes across the bottom of the screen, which is not good. Those boxes should be completely black and blended in with the background. And guys, this is really, really important, especially brightness and contrast. If you get these wrong, things are not going to look good at all. Just the way our eyes work. Our eyes are more sensitive to contrast than anything. So if we don't get the contrast right, the whole picture is going to be kind of whacked out. So as I'm getting a little bit lower here in the brightness control, I'm back down to 54, right? And I'm still in that same position. I can see 19, I can barely see 18, I cannot see 17 at all. So if we go up a click from 54 to 55, now I can see 17 just barely, and that's good. The problem is, though, is I can also start to see the boxes at the bottom, and the background is starting to look a little gray. So I'm going to stick with the original setting that we came up with back in August at 54. Now, I have sacrificed box number 17, but at least the picture won't look washed out, which is okay. Let's take a another look here rather at CalMan, and we're going to measure this and make sure we don't see anything clipping here. I don't think we will. We didn't see it. I didn't see it with my eyes, so I doubt CalMan will see it or the meter will see it, but it's always good to check anyway. So I'm going to click the read series button. What I'm looking for here is red, green, and blue to stay parallel with the yellow line, and it pretty much does. There's a little bit of weirdness going on here towards the top. You can start to see blue and red and green start to sort of flatten out just a little bit, but that's at the very, very, very top of the signal. And remember, when we're looking at the contrast pattern, 100% or 100 IRE is box 235 in the test pattern. So where I'm seeing these little clipping errors or color shifting errors maybe here towards the very top, level 108 is going to be box like 253. Level 109 is going to be box 254, somewhere right around there. So what the graph is telling me is that, the very, very, very top of the grayscale is clipped slightly, and that's okay. If we were to raise the contrast anymore, we would start to clip at lower levels. If we raise the contrast too much, we'll start to clip below 100, and that's obviously going to be bad. So there is a little bit of wiggle up here, as I like to call it. That's okay. That's totally acceptable. I'm not going to be too worried about that. And at this point, the graph and my eyes agree. There's a little bit of clipping at the top end. I can see it in the graph. There's a little bit of clipping on the top end in the test pattern. I can see it with my eyes. It does look like a question came in, so let me take a moment here and just see. Oh, Ladislaw. Okay, hey, he was just saying hello. How you doing? Thanks for joining. Okay, so looks like the brightness and contrast are sorted out. Barely had to touch the contrast at all. Brightness stayed where it's same. Brightness stayed where we left it. It's the same as we left it back in August. Okay, so far so good. Great. Okay, here's one that I was really concerned about. It was the gamma. We did notice that the TV does have a very detailed gamma control, but last time the controls were there, but they didn't really do a whole heck of a lot for us. So we pretty much left them alone. So I'm really curious here to see if the firmware updates since then have figured this out. So what I'm looking for here is a gamma of 2.4 across the entire grayscale. So if we look along the x-axis of this graph, we go from 10%, which is almost black, 50% middle gray, 100% peak white. And the goal here is to have the gamma nice and straight, nice and linear across the entire grayscale. Let's see. Do a read series. And, oop, it started off pretty good. Wow, okay. So notice that it started off fairly good. We were very close to 2.4. Right around 40%, things go crazy. The gamma goes from, right about a 2.4. It ramps up at about 80% and it peaks at about 3. And then it comes back down around 90. It's close to 2.4 again, and then it sort of levels out again. So what does this actually mean? This means that at 80%, 50 to about 80%, that part of the grayscale is too dark. How do I know that? Well, look at the numbers. 2.4 is our reference line. The tricky thing about gamma you have to remember is the higher the gamma number, the darker the picture, the darker the test pattern you're looking at. It's kind of backwards, right? You think of a higher number being brighter, and it's actually the opposite. So if we're supposed to be at a 2.4, we're really at a 3 over here at 80%. That means 80% is way too dark. If the gray line had dipped way down, then that would mean that 80% was way too bright, maybe around a 1.8 or so. So I have one prediction here, one theory maybe. This may be a case of we played with the 10-point controls last time, didn't have much luck, left them alone, and maybe I did not reset those values back to 0, which, shame on me, I should have. What happens sometimes is you're in a menu, you're fiddling with things, maybe it's color management, maybe it's 10-point, 20-point white balance, like in this case, and you're ramping things all the way up, all the way down, nothing's happening. And you're like, okay, well, these controls don't work. No big deal, I'll just move on. Well, if you don't put those back to 0 or back to their factory positions, later there's a firmware update and boom, all of a sudden those controls work and you left things way high, way low, whatever, and now you get these weird graphs. That might be the case. We may have 80% in the gamma control cranked way too low. So let's test the theory. We're gonna go into the menu, and I believe this was under advanced or it was under calibration settings, one of the two. Yep, calibration settings and then gamma calibration. So here we go. At input level 65, we're -5. This makes sense. Why does it make sense? Because 65 would be right here. It's way too dark, and the gain control is at -5. So last time we turned 65% down 5 clicks. This time when we measure that, it's way too dark. So my next prediction is the levels from 50 to about 80 are all going to be down in the negatives as far as the adjustments go. So let's see. So we go 65 to 70. Yep, 70 is a -2. 75 is a -5, which makes sense here, right? Because the levels are getting darker and darker. I bet 80 is going to be pretty low. Yep, 80 is a -5 also. So that's the explanation of that weird spike that we had here. And it probably has a lot to do with the weird measurement we got at the very beginning where, let's go back to that page, and there was a little weird action going on here with the white balance at least. So, all these things are sort of interrelated. So let's get this sorted out. So let's go back to the gamma page, and what I want to do here is at least zero out these controls. So the first one I'm going to start with is the most obvious one at 80%. So I'm going to choose 80% as my test pattern and then do a continuous read. I want live feedback as I'm doing this. Now, as soon as I hit the read series button, you saw that level way up here near 3 drop down to about a 2.6. Why did it do that? Remember, guys, the menu's on the screen. So this is going to be a little bit of balancing between having the menu on the screen, off the screen, finding the right adjustment, but it should be pretty easy. Again, I'm going to start off just by zeroing these things out. So I do want to go through and make sure we didn't change much anywhere else. Let's just go ahead and zero all this back out. Actually, there's a nice restore gamma calibration button right here. So that means I don't have to go through each level and zero them back out. So if we do a restore on the gamma calibration, that should zero out all of the different levels as far as the gain controls. So 5%, 10. I'm looking for zeros down here in the gain menu. 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, and up to 100. Everything is zeroed out again. Okay, great. So that restore gamma calibration button does work. Cool. So now that we've got everything zeroed out again in the gamma, let's read it and let's see if we get a better response. And just so I can compare the two, I'm going to open up another tab up here in CalMan, and just so I can keep track of everything and not forget, I'm just going to name this one Gamma 0, so I know. And then the first history, I'm going to name Gamma Modified. So now I can just compare the two. Okay, so let's take a read series, and let's see if we're a little flatter this time around. Okay, wow. So with everything zeroed out, the dark end of the grayscale is way too bright, and it doesn't really do anything good until the very end. So I've got to try to figure out a way to get this gray line a little bit flatter and a little bit closer to 2.4. So now that we saw a big change, at least at 80%, 75%, 70% with the luminance control or the gain control, this makes me think that maybe these controls have been fixed. I don't know. Let's try. One thing we do have to change though, remember in the menu, the levels went from 5, 10, 15, 20, increments of 20, increments of 5 rather. So that tells me there's 20 adjustments. And the bottom of CalMan right now, it's set up for 10 points. So 10, 20, 30, 40, etc. I want to get these levels in increments of 5. So if we go up to the settings wheel in CalMan, about halfway down or a third of the way down, we're going to change the grayscale points from 10 to 21. Now you'll notice down at the bottom, we've got 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way up to 100. The 21 step in CalMan, the 21st step is 0. That's probably going to give us some wacky reading. We can completely ignore 0, no big deal. Let's take another closer look at this now that we have more detail. Now you can see in the graph, we measured the 10 point before, and it still does make that same exact sort of line. But now that we have a little more detail with the 20 point, let's see if that line is still the same shape. I'm sure it will be, but let's see. And sure enough, if we look at the original versus now, oh, I can't read this one because we reset it, but still, it does still make a not flat, not very good line. So I don't know if we can fix this or not. This is something that we're going to discover together. So typically when you're playing with a 10 or a 20 point, either white balance control, or in this case, luminance control, I always like to start at the top end, the bright end, and work my way down. But I do want, before I get too deep into this and spend a whole bunch of time, I want to make sure that the controls themselves actually work. So just as a test here, I'm going to pick 50% gray, which is right in the middle. Now I want to adjust the gain control and watch the graph to see if things actually move around. So we're going to pick 50 down in CalMan because I've got 50 chosen in the TV. And I just want to blow this control up and down, see if anything changes. So I've got the gain all the way up to 25. Now let's go all the way down to 0. And again, I'm watching the 50 control right here. And no change. Let's just go all the way back up again. And wow, no change. So guys, this might be something that we can't do anything about. I do want to investigate a little bit more though, just in case. I did also notice too, there was a pattern insertion on the screen while I was taking readings, and that is probably just still turned on from last time, because last time I was most likely working on an OLED. So we don't need the pattern insertion for an LCD TV or really any other TV other than OLED, or maybe you're still working on a plasma. That's okay if you are, but you'll only need the pattern insertion for those types of displays. Anything self-emissive. LED, LCD, like what we're looking at here, don't need it. No big deal. Okay, so let's try, instead of 50, let's try 80. Let's see if 80 makes a difference. So let's change the input level to 80. And then in CalMan, I have 80 chosen because that's the test pattern I want. And do a continuous read. And I want to watch this 80 right here. As I crank it up, it should get brighter, meaning that it should drop. And no change. If we go lower, the 80 point should go up and get darker. And nothing. Okay, now the other thing I'm kind of curious about here too is the menu on the screen stopping these changes from being made? So if I exit the menu and see a big jump here, then we know the menu is really messing up the readings. So let's exit the menu. And wow, look at that. So our prediction of the menu on the screen, it still stands. And it looks like in this case, after these firmware updates, it might be even a little worse than last time. So here's what I want to do. I want to go through and I just want to sort of guesstimate some of these levels, and then we'll verify with the meter to see if we're actually making any improvements here or not. So again, let's get these zeroed back out. Things start to really go haywire at about 90%. So I'm going to take 90% and actually let's take a, now that let's get the menus off the screen and let's just take another read series. This way we know exactly what's going on. And while that's happening, let's check the question box. And no questions so far. Okay, cool. Okay, so in this case, 95 needs to be a little bit darker. 90 is pretty close, again, just a little darker. And we have this trend throughout the entire grayscale, but it gets worse as we go to the darker side of the grayscale. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna lower the gain control from 95 down to about 70, but I'm only gonna make small adjustments. And then from 70 down, we might make bigger adjustments. But I do wanna make sure this all works. So let's try it first. I'm gonna go back to calibration settings and then gamma calibration. So at 95, it's just a little bit too bright. So we're gonna darken it like 5 clicks. Let's go to 90 and do the same 5 clicks. Let's go to 85, same 5 clicks, 80, same 5 clicks. And yeah, let's just do 75 and 70. 75 starts to get a little lower than the rest on the top end. So if you look at 75 versus 90, for example, there's a pretty big discrepancy there if you zoom in. So for 75, I'm actually gonna go, let's go -7 clicks. And then 70 will do the same, -7. Now, if this works, the hope is from 70 and up, we have a nice flat line. We'll see. And if that works, I'll continue down and try to flatten everything out. If it doesn't work, we might be we're kind of stuck here with a bad control. Okay. Kind of weird, not great. I'm gonna take, let's do this. I'm gonna take 90. Let's see here. 90 is still quite a bit too bright. So if we go 90, I'm gonna go down a lot of clicks. Let's go to -20. I don't like that many clicks a lot of times. It can cause some weird artifacts and banding and things like that. So it's really important here when you're making these adjustments, also look at some stuff too. Make sure you're not causing any weird issues. So that was what, 90, right? So I'm going to choose 90 down here and just take a single read with the play button. Hopefully it jumps way up to the yellow line. And no. Okay, kind of disappointing. So let's see what else we might be able to do here. Let's zero out those gamma controls again. Let's see if we can have any luck with just the main gamma control. There might be some other settings in here that will bring the line up. Okay, those are all back to 0. Let's just go through and yeah, they're all back to 0. Okay. Now the gamma on the TV right now is set to 2.4. Ooh, and that's the darkest. So just for giggles, 2.4 and 1886 should be about the same. Let's test. Let's open up another tab up here, and then I'm going to rename it 1886. And just a quick story about 1886. Gamma was never really defined until about 2011. It could be 2.4, it could be 2.2, it could be 2.0, it could be 2.6. It was just up to the content creators and the calibrators, right? And it was kind of tough because if you calibrated a TV for 2.4 in a dark room, but the content was graded for 2.2, then things don't quite look right. So finally in 2011, enough is enough. Let's make a standard for gamma. And the standard for gamma is now called BT 1886. And what's interesting about 1886 is if you lay that curve on top of a 2.4 curve, they're almost identical. So we should see the same results here, but let's try it out. Never know till you try. Now, since I open up another tab here, we can quickly toggle between the two tabs and sort of confirm all this. Okay, so gamma 0 versus, I'm sorry, gamma 2.4 with everything zeroed out looks like this. 1886 on the factory settings with the gain controls looks like that. Neither one of these are great. So I'm probably just going to stick with 1886. One other thing I do want to try here is I wonder if the local dimming is causing this issue. It could be. So here's how you can test it. Turn the local dimming off. And I just have to find it again. I think it was under advanced or it was under the backlight. I do not remember. And probably backlight. Yep, local dimming medium. So let's turn it off. I could see, wow, could you guys see the change in the TV? I could. So we go medium. Oh yeah, you can see the TV flash on the camera. Okay, so let's turn it off. And let's take another reading. And normally, guys, you don't have to spend this much time on gamma. This is just a weird thing. So let's rename this one local dimming off. And let's see. Still not great. It does this weird S thing where it starts off too bright and then ends up too dark. Guys, I don't think there's going to be a lot that we can do about this. Now, is it closer to 2.4? I guess, right? But it's still a bad shape, you know? So this is a tough call. This is where you have to make some of those tough judgment calls as a calibrator. You know, do I go for a slightly better graph or do I go for a better looking picture? And, you know, with a local dimming TV like this, if we turn the local dimming off, the background is going to be gray. And you've completely eliminated like one of the main benefits of buying a local dimming TV, and that's more dynamic range because you get better blacks, right? So in this case, it's like, man, do I want a slightly better looking graph, or do I want a better looking picture? And if I have to choose between the two, I'm going to take the better looking picture all day, every day. So we're looking at numbers, we're looking at graphs. We still have not looked at anything with our eyes. So let's take a look at a grayscale. We're going to go 16-step grayscale. And let's just take a quick peek at it visually. Now the local dimming is off. And I don't know how well you can see this. I think you actually might be able to see it fairly well, but the blackest bar, you can see my finger here by the meter. So if we go to the darkest bar, that bar should be black, and it's very, very light gray. So let's see if the local dimming helps visually, and I think it will. It did last time, but again, there's been firmware updates, so let's see. Oops, backlight right there. Okay, local dimming off, and then to low. Let's watch those darkest bars. Let's do it again. Off. Okay, off to low is making a small difference, but it's also doing something else kind of strange. Can you see this in the camera? With the local dimming off, the grayscale, oh yeah, you can. The grayscale is a little bluer. With the local dimming on low, it looks a little closer to correct. And the blacks are better. Let's try medium. And by the way, the reason I pointed that out, guys, about off looking a little blue, that's not normal. Most TVs, if you turn the local dimming off or on, or turn the backlight up or down, everything should move in a uniform fashion. So in other words, if I turn the backlight up, the color of the screen shouldn't change. It should just get brighter, right? So the fact that the grayscale is changing between off and low and the local dimming's kind of weird. But we're not going to leave it off anyway, because we know it does no justice for the black levels for dynamic range. So let's go from low to medium. And back in August when we did this the first time, low to medium made a really nice change. So let's see if that's the same case now. It did. Okay, good. I noticed that the darkest bar did get even a little bit darker at medium. That's a good sign. Now, last time, medium to high made virtually no difference. This is actually pretty common on a lot of TVs for some reason, but it is. We go to high, and I actually saw it get a little dimmer, to be honest. So I think we're going to stick with medium here. Now, also, a test pattern's a test pattern, but what about real life content? Let's pull up a skin tone pattern, and let's do that same thing, but now we're looking at something a little closer to real world. Oops, my brain is still in the gamma menu when I should be in the backlight menu. There we go. Okay, local dimming off. Oh wow, yep, background turns really bluish, which is supposed to be gray. This background of this test image is a grayscale, so it definitely turns blue. And I'm also noticing too darker details, like mostly the two people on the left, the gentleman up top and the female down at the bottom, their hair is a lot darker. The gentleman on the left has dark jeans, and when I turn the local dimming off, all of that stuff got a lot lighter. So not ideal. If we go to low, grayscale changed a little bit, which is still tripping me out a little bit, but the jeans got a little darker, the hair got a little darker, not much of a change. And then we go back to medium, and wow, okay, medium does seem to be kind of the best option here. And just now that we're looking at real world content, let's just check high. And again, in the test pattern and in the reference test image, high actually got a little bit darker for some reason. So we're going to stick with, medium. Okay, not ideal, but the picture still doesn't look bad. I can still see good detail in the jeans. I can still see good detail in the hair, which is actually pretty good considering we had to sacrifice box 17 when we adjusted the brightness. So this is a little disappointing, guys, but it's not the end of the world. You also have to remember too, this is a, I think what, $600 TV, maybe $500 TV, I think is what we paid for it back in August. So I don't really expect it to be perfect in any way. We don't really expect any display to be perfect now that I'm saying that, whether it's a studio monitor or a consumer TV like this. But it does seem that we can't really do a lot here with the gamma. So, we just have to chalk that up as just something we have to just deal with. Okay, color and tint, these controls worked just fine on the back in August when we did this the first time. It did have a blue only mode. Let's see if that still works. Probably does. I think that was under advanced, but I could be wrong. Yep, it's going to be under the calibration settings menu. Watch. Boom, there it is, RGB only. So let's turn that to blue and look at the color bars. Now, How well can you see this in the camera? And oh, you can actually see it fairly well. Okay, so again, brightness, I'm sorry, color and tint, nothing's changed in the past gazillion years since we've had color TVs when adjusting color and tint. We want to look at the two bars right here, which are blue and white. They should blend together. Then we want to look at these two bars, which are cyan and magenta. They should blend together. So when I'm trying to get the blue and the white to blend together, I'm going to use the color saturation control. When I want the cyan and magenta bars to melt together, then we're going to use the tint control. It also might be called hue on some TVs. You can also, by the way, these two are also cyan magenta, and the last two are also blue and white. Hard to tell with the color bars with the blue only mode up there, but let's go ahead and go into the color control. Just right here, it's at the factory setting of 50, and I don't know whether I'm supposed to turn it up or down, so I'm just going to guess up. And I want these two bars to melt together. 51, 52, 53, 55, 54, 55, 56, 57. Okay, so as I went from 50 to about 59, there were some changes. Some of them were very slight, and at no point do the two bars blend together perfectly, and that's okay. If that's the case, just get them as close as you can. So I don't think this is going to be the case, but if I go down, it's probably just going to get worse and worse and worse, and it sure is. So we're going to be somewhere above 50. I probably are going to want to say here, maybe around, and I don't want to go too high because I don't want to make skin tones look kind of funny. So right around 56, the bars are about as blended as I can make them. Let's check the tint control. And again, we're going to look at these two, try to get those to blend together. And 0 is factory. I'm going to go to the right, which if you look at the tint control, going towards the right shifts towards green. So I go 1 click, it actually blends a little bit better. 2 clicks, 3 clicks, 4 clicks, all gets worse. So we're either going to be right at +1, but let's go down into the negatives and see if that's any better. -1, -2, nope, those are all worse. So we're either going to be factory position of 0, or I might come up 1 click to get those bars just to blend a little bit better. Now, again, a test pattern is a test pattern. We want to look at some real world content here as well. Bringing the color up 6 clicks might make skin tones look a little funny. Making the tint 1 click towards green might make things look a little green. But again, we have to check first. So let's turn off the blue only mode. And now that the blue only mode or the blue filter's off, you can see what I was mentioning before. When you're adjusting color, these two should blend together. You could also look at the blue and white on this side. When you're looking at the tint control or the hue control, you can either use cyan and magenta here, or if you want, you can use cyan and magenta here. So let's look at some real content, or at least a real image. We're going to go back to that portrait displays, what I call the family portrait. Oops, not the grayscale. I wanted to do that, ISF skin tone. Okay, so again, color came up 6 clicks, but as I'm looking at the image, it doesn't look oversaturated. It doesn't look way too colorful. It doesn't look like cartoony or anything like that. Actually looks pretty good. Now, the other thing I'm noticing too is we did adjust the tint control 1 click into the green, and it doesn't really look green to me, but let's see if I can see a difference between 0 and that first click. I doubt it. It's only 1 click, but you never know. Wow. Okay, guys, if there's a change, it's extremely subtle, and I'm not seeing it with my eyes. Maybe just a little bit, but you know, staring at a bright TV a foot or two away from it, it can be a little tricky. But yeah, I'm just really not seeing any change at all until I go, you know, 4 or 5 clicks. Now, if I go, it's right around the 3rd click into green, the skin tones do start to look green. So we definitely don't want to go any further than 1 if we're going to go that way at all. But again, as I'm toggling between 0 and 1, I mean, it is like pretty much no difference at all. So maybe just to be on the safe side, I would hate for another firmware update later to make this control even more aggressive. So I'm a little scared to leave it at G1, to be honest with you. I'm just going to leave it at 0 at the factory position and just let it ride from there. Let me take a quick look here at the question box just to make sure there's no questions. And none so far. Okay, cool, good. Guys, don't be shy. If you see anything you have a question about, that's why we're here to learn. So feel free to chime in. Okay, so color and tints, I'm happy with those. Remember, this TV does have a color management system, which did not work last time. Maybe it works this time, but we're getting pretty close. Okay, also last time when we adjusted the sharpness on this TV, the sharpness ended up being kind of a placebo control, which we've seen before. So let's see if the firmware changed that at all. I'm going to pull up the ISF geometry pattern, and the aspect ratio is still in direct mode from last time we calibrated the TV. And with it in direct mode, I can still see the top, bottom, left, and right tips of this big diamond. So direct mode seems like it is still the correct adjustment here. If we go to the picture size menu, we're in direct now. If we go auto, doesn't change. Normal does some weird squeezy thing, probably 4:3. Zoom stretches the 4:3 out a little bit, which definitely starts to look kind of weird. There's a wide mode, which looks like it works as well. Oops. What else do we have here? Direct, which is one that we like for sure. There's a panoramic setting, which I do remember from last time and don't remember seeing it really do much. I wonder if that panoramic setting has something to do with the image that's on the screen. Cinema squeezes everything, which makes sense if you're watching different stuff. Okay, let's see if what does that panoramic setting even do? Maybe nothing. Might be something that they explain in the manual, but I'm not seeing anything here that is changing when I choose it. So, okay, that's okay. I still like the direct mode. We're going to keep that. Now, is the sharpness control still nothing? Let's see. We're going to pick the ISF geometry pattern. And let's go to the sharpness control. And the sharpness is still at 0 from last time. Okay, sharpness, I want to turn this up. And I'm going to crank it on purpose because if there's going to be a change at all, it should be pretty obvious. And just a refresher, in case you didn't watch the last video, or if you've never seen this test pattern before, the test pattern is 1920 by 1080, right? And if we look at the numbers on the test pattern, the first hash mark here is 0. The last one is 1920. Up top, we go 0, down to the bottom is 1080, right? So what I'm looking at here are these little, I like to call them ruler marks or hash marks. If I crank up the sharpness control, if the sharpness control does anything, we'll start to see those nice black lines start to bloom or halo, and you'll see some white artifacts and white distortions like around the lines. Very, very obvious. Okay, this is cool. You guys can see it on camera too, which is a bonus. The sharpness control does work now. And if I have it at 20, you can see all kinds of distortion in these lines, and you can start to see some aliasing and some really nasty distortion in the circle in the middle. I'll floor it down to the bottom again, and you'll see those things clean up, even on the camera. And guys, if you can see that on camera, you should see it with your eyes. It's very obvious. Now, that being said, 0 is still the correct setting. You won't see this subtle change with the camera, but with my eyes, if I get up to about 3 or 4, I really start to see the ringing effect or the haloing. If I get up past 6, 7, you can probably start to see it in the camera. So this is interesting. The sharpness control works now. It didn't work before. That must have been something they fixed in the firmware. Either way, though, we're still going to have it at 0 anyway. That's still the correct setting. Now, it might seem kind of counterintuitive that you turn the sharpness down to get a sharper picture, but if you have all that distortion and haloing and artifacting going around these little lines and the circles and the pattern and stuff, what do you think that will do to really fine detail or text on the screen? If you're watching a stock ticker, or you're reading something on the screen, or you're looking at something that's super detailed, maybe you're watching, Planet Earth or Blue Planet, they're zoomed into like a tiger's face and you can make out its fur and its whiskers and stuff. If the sharpness is cranked up, all that stuff gets distorted and looks very, very, very gross. So sharpness at 0 is the correct setting on this TV. Okay, now here's where we're going to start to see if colors have drifted since we calibrated it last time. We want to see how the grayscale looks now. We've done some adjustments. We played with the brightness, we played with the contrast. We've changed a couple of things. So before we know what needs to be done, let's get a baseline measurement. Okay, the grayscale is still too blue. Now, we had that fairly close last time, so this TV did drift. Now, did it drift a ton? Well, you know, if our target is 313,329 for perfect white, and we're at 307,319, it drifted a little. You know, it drifted on the X coordinate, you know, 313 is the target, and we're at 307. This is out of tolerance, so this would be something that you would see with your eyes. On the y-axis, you know, we're anywhere from like 319, 318 to about 323. The target there is 329. So, you know, we have drifted a little bit. Now, it's not a ton. And the good news is that when the panel drifted, it drifted towards blue. You know, if it's going to drift anywhere, I would rather it drift towards blue than towards red or towards green. Why is that? That's because our eyes are most sensitive to green first, then red, and then blue. So if the grayscale is a little blue, most people aren't going to notice it. But if the grayscale is a little pink, most people will see a difference. If the grayscale is a little green, everybody's going to see it. It makes skin tones look gross. Everybody looks sick. It makes just everything has a green cast to it, like you're watching everything in the Matrix. It's very, very noticeable. So the fact that it drifted and it drifted towards blue, you know, that's not so bad. You know, and considering that it had basically no hours on it the first time, and we're a little over 100 hours this time, you know, the combination of the aging and the calibration, it's not surprising to me that it's drifted a little bit. So let's go ahead and redo the white balance. We're going to do the 2-point white balance first, which is this TV does have. For my reference points for the 2-point white balance, we'll just stick with the standard 30 and 80% like we always do. If there's any weird deviances or readings, we can choose 2 other points, but let's just start with 80 and 30. So general best practice here, we're always going to calibrate the brighter level first. So in this case, it's going to be 80. And let's just take a quick read of 80. And we're at 308,320. So 80's here, that means there's too much blue. Now remember on this TV, guys, the menu on the screen does throw off the readings. So I'm going to do this in kind of a predictive way, like I did before. We're going to go into calibration settings and then white balance. We'll do the 2-point, and you know, these levels, you guys can see the values from last time. The low end we didn't touch, that was left at factory. The bright end of the grayscale, we had red at -5, green at -2, and blue at 0. So with those values from last time, we obviously have some drift here. Now I could approach this 2 different ways. I could go ahead and reset this and just start with all zeros again, or I can just modify what's already there. Now, you know, we've only modified 2 menu items here, so resetting this isn't going to be that big of a deal. So let's just go ahead and reset it, and we'll start from scratch with the grayscale. Okay, now those are zeroed out again. Let's see if we still have the same problems with too much blue. I'm sure it will be, but so we're going to open up another tab, and I'm going to rename that tab white balance 0, just so I can keep track of which tab is which. Now with the white balance zeroed out again, let's see if it's still too blue. And it looks like it is. Well, at least most of it is. There's a little bit of weirdness going on here towards the top end. Oh, you know what? Before we get too crazy, let's also make sure, let's also check the 20-point white balance controls too. Those might still be modified from last time, because I know we did play with them at least. I don't think we kept them, but we played with them. Okay, so these are all grayed out right now because the 20-point white balance is turned off, which totally tells me that we didn't use it last time. Let's turn it on and then reset it. This is one of the biggest things I was curious about to revisit this TV, is were they able to fix these controls? And it's kind of a bummer when it has it, but you can't actually use them. You know, it's like the speedometer on your car says 150, but you can only go 80. It's like, oh man, I wish I could go 150, but you know, that's okay. So those are back to reset and the 20 points turned off, which that means we should have the same graph, but let's double check. Open up another tab, and I'm going to name this one all white balance 0. So that's the 2 point and the 20 point. We're completely back to factory for the mid-low color temperature. So let's see. And it looks like, yeah, it's the same. Let's just take a quick look at the other tab. I'm watching this RGB balance graph right here, and basically identical. So a little bit of work to do, not a ton. We'll start with the 2 point, as I mentioned before. We're going to use 80 as our reference point for the bright end of the grayscale. And again, I'm going to have to sort of predict this because the menu on the screen will throw things off. Now at 80, you'll see that red's a little high, blue's a little high, and green's a little low. Now, if you've taken classes before and you've learned about calibration, you know, you've probably heard over the years to not touch the green control when doing white balance. That's how we've taught it for a really long time. That's how I learned it way back in the day. For the longest time, most TVs, if not all of them, if you adjusted the green control at all, it just caused havoc. I mean, one click up, you know, if you'd add one click of green to the grayscale, the green might jump way high, and now everything looks green again. So best practice over the years has always been, you know, play with the red and blue controls first and use green as a last resort in case you need it. So I want to see if this TV is overly sensitive with the green control, like a lot of TVs tend to be. Because the easiest way to fix this, guys, I mean, if you're doing this efficiently, the easiest thing to do here is to just bump green up a little bit. But if that causes problems, then we'll go back and just stick with the red and blue controls. I have noticed in some TVs, the green control isn't so aggressive like it was in years past. But again, we don't know. Let's try. White balance, 2 point. We're going to go to the gain control, and let's add just 2 clicks of green. And let's just take a quick read. And look at that. Green came up a bit, a little too high actually, and blue is right there with it, and red is down a little. So that green that I did, 2 clicks, maybe 2 clicks was one too many. Let's try this again, back to 1. And we're going to do a single read. And boom, look at that, very even, right? And if we look at the numbers, 312, 327. Remember, 313, 329 is a bullseye, but you don't have to hit the bullseye. You just have to get it within tolerance. There is a tolerance of 0.004 on X in either direction. So if the target's 313, right here, dead center, I can be a little to the left or a little to the right, and it's still within tolerance. The tolerance is 0.004. So if the target's 313, I can be to the right a little bit, up to about 317. I can be to the left a little bit, down to about 309. As long as I'm within that window, it's within a visible tolerance. Most people, unless they're studio people or extremely sensitive to this, aren't going to notice at all. So I'm very happy with 312, 327. All we had to do is bump in 1 click of green on the top end of the 2 point white balance. So far, so good. Let's go to the dark end. We're going to pick 30. And this time we're going to be using the offset controls in the white balance menu. And before I do that, I do want to read it first because we did change the top end. They do tend to interact. Ooh, wow. Okay, wait a second. 311, 327. Wow. I might just pop in a click of red, and that might be all we need to do to the bottom end. What I'm really nervous about, though, is what's going on at the very, very top. We might be able to fix that. later, but let's get the 2 point under control first. So let's add in 1 click of red. And we're just going to read 80 real quick, or sorry, 30 real quick one more time. And the red did raise a tad, and we're now at 312326. So good, within tolerance. Great. Now that was a 2 point white balance. How does the rest of the grayscale look? Don't know. Got to measure it first. So we go to the next page. This is still set up as a 20 point or 21 technically. Oh no, this is a 20 point because we've got 5 to 100. The TV has a 20 point, so this will line up nice. Let's take a reading now of the grayscale after doing the 2 point. Okay, now this doesn't look bad. Now you might be looking at the line and saying, why does it start off, way up here near 40 and go at this sort of diagonal direction down towards 100? Guys, remember back on the gamma page, we had this mess going on. So it started off too bright and ended up a little too dark when we initially set the gamma several pages ago. Now when we go to this page, this kind of tells us the same information, except for there was a slight improvement. It starts off too bright, and it comes down and down and down, and now right around 85 or 90%, it does level off. So we're looking pretty good here. The bottom end is still a little too bright, but again, we couldn't really do anything about that. Now, what I'm really concerned with here more than anything are the numbers themselves. So if we go through, I want to make sure first there are no positive green errors, because remember what I said before, green errors are the worst. You can see them from a mile away. So how will I know if there's any green errors? Remember, the target is 313 on the x-axis and 329 on the y-axis, up and down. So if I'm anywhere north of 329 on my y-axis, I know it's too green. Now remember, we mentioned before, on the x-axis, you can be a little to the right, a little to the left. As long as you're within 0.004 of 313, like let's say you're 311, you're still within tolerance, no big deal. And you can see because the dot's like right there, right? Now, if we look at the Y number, that's 323. It's going to be slightly south of the box, but it's not north, which is good. And I'm not seeing any dots here north of the box. And I'm also not seeing any numbers in Y that are above 329. So this is good. Oops, let's do this again this way. As we go all the way across, oh, I do have a 330 at 95 and a 330 at 90. So if we look at X, we're basically 311, 323, 312, 311, 315, 316, and there are basically no visible errors in X. And there are really no visible errors in Y except for 90 and 95. So fingers crossed that the 20-point white balance works. If it does, all I'm going to do here is take a click of green out of 95 and a click of green out of 90. And if these controls do in fact work, we should be, 329, 328, 327, somewhere right around there. Now, how do we know if the controls work? We got to test them. So here's how I would do it. I would bring up a 95 test pattern like this, or maybe even a 90, doesn't matter. They're both a little too green. So I've got a 90 test pattern chosen right now. Now, what we're going to do is go into the menu. You can also do this with a grayscale, by the way, but with the menu completely blocking the screen on that side, not really going to help us to look at a grayscale, at least the traditional 16-step grayscale. I'm just going to pull up a 90% full field here, and we're going to turn on, oops, wrong menu. We're going to turn on the 20-point white balance. So boom, now it's on. Now I want to find level 95 right there, and I'm just going to floor the green. What should happen here? That white test pattern should turn kind of green. If it does, we know the control works. How well it works is another story, but we know it does something. If I turn the green down a whole bunch, the screen should start to turn kind of a magenta purple color. So let's go green first. Let's go to the positives. Does the screen turn green? And I'm watching it with my eyes. and I am just seeing like no difference. Nope. Okay, so let's go down and let's see if the white test pattern turns pink or purple. If you look at a CIE chart, green is up here, magenta is down here. They're opposites of each other, right? So if I remove green, I should see magenta. If I add green, I should see green, and I'm not seeing it all. So I don't know if they've quite fixed these controls yet. Let's also try 90. Oh, you know what? I was on a 95 test pattern, but I was on a 95 adjustment in the TV, but I had 90 chosen in CalMan. So that was my bad. Let's try this again. Let's add green to 90. And unfortunately, it's still the same. Even when I do it correctly, it's still the same. So let's just go the other way. Does the white turn magenta? And no, it does not. So even with me choosing the correct levels, still no improvement. What we do notice sometimes, I think I mentioned this last time we worked on this TV. There's a lot of TVs out there where the 10 or 20 point white balance controls don't work until you get to like a certain point in the grayscale. So if we check 50 and I bring up a 50 test pattern in CalMan, maybe the 20 point white balance controls work way up here somewhere. So I'm going to add a bunch of green and see if it turns green with my eyes. And wow, nothing. Let's go to the negatives and see if it turns magenta. Still nothing. Okay. So at 95, at 90, at 50, none of these controls are doing anything. A little discouraging. I was hoping they would fix this. You can also check this again, like I said before, with a 16-step grayscale. If we look on the right side of the screen, that's all of the bright levels. The left side of the screen is all the dark levels. So let's just go to like level 30 or even 25. So level 25 will be, one of these darker bars. Let's crank up the green and look at that bar right there. Wow, look at these 3 bars right here. So something is happening. Here's my concern. If I'm adjusting level 25, 3, 4, 5 bars should not be changing color. 25 should be a discrete control for only level 25. So for you audio guys out there, think about this metaphor. Let's say you have an equalizer and you go to put some boost or put some gain into 1 kilohertz. But when you do that, it also boosts 900, 800, 700, 600, and 1100, and 1200, and 1300, and 1400, right? So these discrete controls are not very discrete, which makes me very nervous to use them. Let's go back down to 0. And let's see if those same bars turn magenta. And they sure do, and more than one of them do. So again, a little discouraging. I wish they had fixed this. There's one other thing I do want to try. We do notice on some TVs, if the contrast control is anywhere other than factory, this doesn't work. Whether 10 point, 20 point, doesn't matter. So let's just test that theory. Let's see if putting the contrast back to the factory position does make improvements here. That does sort of ruin some of the work that we've done already. We might be clipping some white now and stuff like that. But at this point, again, just curious. Let's go back to 50. Now let's see if those controls are a little bit better lined up. So we're still at level 25. Let's crank up the green. Now you'll notice, this is interesting. This bar was turning green first with the contrast at the proper position. This bar was turning green first when we had the contrast at the factory position. So I'm not very confident in this. I'm not going to use it. Normally, if it did work, you would want to start at the brightest level. In this case, it's 100. You would pick 100 in your software, and you would balance out 100. Then you would go to 95, and you would fix 95, choose 80 in the TV, 80 in your software, and proceed all the way down to 10 or 5%. But these controls are not working. I'm not even going to bother with them because we'll sit here for hours trying to fiddle with it and we're not going to get anywhere. Trust me, I've been here before. You have to remember when these 10 and 20 point white balance systems were first introduced, I want to say back in maybe 2009 or 10, they were real sketchy. And they're still sketchy on a lot of TVs, as you can see here. In a lot of TVs nowadays, I do notice that those controls do work a lot better than they have in years past. But in this particular case, with this particular TV on this particular firmware, looks like it's going to be a no-go. So one thing I need to do here that we didn't do last time is let's reset all those values back to factory. And then let's go ahead and just turn the 20 point off altogether. And it turned itself off after the reset. Okay, cool. Let's check the 2 point real quick. My values are still there. Just a click here or there that seemed to do it for the most part. And since we were messing with things so much, let's just take one more read of the grayscale and make sure that things still look pretty good. Still looks pretty good. Looks like there might be a little red from 70% to about 95%. Let's look at the numbers. 315, 315, 316. They are still within tolerance, so I'm not too worried about it. If I was being extremely picky, I probably would try to get these a little closer to 313. But again, there's not much I can do because the 20 point white balance doesn't work. But it's showing up on the graph. It's not going to show up in real life. And if you want to just double check that with your eyes, pull up a grayscale pattern and just look for the top end to be kind of pink. If it's not, then no worries, no big deal. And as I'm looking right now, it actually looks really, really good. I don't see any tint of any color. We're very, very neutral gray all the way through. No pink, no green, no yellow, no blue, no kind of weird cyan colors or cyan bars. The darkest bar is basically black. It's actually really hard for me to see a difference between the bar and the bezel. There is some light in here, so I would expect to see those pretty easily. I have to really squint to see the bezel, so that's good. So for just having a 2 point white balance and still kind of a wacky gamma curve, this isn't so bad, guys. This isn't so bad at all. All right, now that the white balance is under control, this was the other thing I was really curious about, is if the color management system worked better after the new firmware. We don't know where it's at, so let's measure it first. White's right in the middle now, which is good. Okay, not too much different than what we saw at the beginning. But let's just take a quick look because some things are different, but it's not huge. If we look at the pre-calibration view, remember, green was a little undersaturated, red was a little over, blue was a little under. So if we're looking at just the primary colors, look at them now. Same. Green's a little undersaturated, red's a little under now, and blue's way under now. So they're very close to the same. They just moved a little bit. On the luminance graph over here, it looks like every color is too bright, but because the graph is scaled very small, we're only looking at a difference of 1 to -1. So if these levels are higher than that, we're not going to see them. So you have to rescale the graph. The way you do that is right-click, go to Properties. Under Axis Property, about halfway down, we're going to change this to Auto. Now the graph is going to scale based on the biggest error in the graph. So now instead of 1 to -1, where things were off the charts, now we're looking at 60 to -60, and now we can actually see what's really going on. So blue is way too bright. So is red. So is magenta, for that matter. Green, cyan, and yellow, they're better. Still a little bit too bright. $1 million question now, guys. Do the color management controls work since the firmware update? So there's really no rhyme or reason of doing this. I just kind of do it the same way every time, so I know I hit everything. I like to start with the biggest error first. Some people like to start with red first because it's the first one in the software that's listed, and that's okay. I'm going to start with blue. That's the biggest error. So what's wrong with blue? Well, A, it's way undersaturated and it's way too bright. So if we look at the delta error for blue, it's 5.4, which is outside of visible tolerance. We want these numbers to be low, 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 low. Under 3.0 would be really good. Under 1.0 would be very good. So red's a 4.9. It's too bright. It's undersaturated. Green's a 2.7. Little undersaturated, a lot undersaturated, but closer to its correct luminance. But it's still a 2.7. It's creeping up to be a visible error. Blue's a 5.4, way too bright, way too undersaturated. Cyan's pretty good, 1.49. It's a little undersaturated and a little green. Magenta is a 5.6, slightly undersaturated, too bright. Yellow's a 1.2, slightly undersaturated, pretty good on the hue, and just a little bit bright. So fingers crossed that the controls work. If they do work, we should be able to tighten this up and get a really good color gamut. I'm going to start with blue first, because it's the worst. Now, the two things that are really bad about blue, right off the bat, undersaturated and way too bright. So which one do you fix first? Well, depends on how the TV reacts. Sometimes the luminance control will affect the saturation. Sometimes saturation control will affect the luminance. Since this thing's been updated, who knows? So let's see if we can figure it out. We'll go to the color tuner menu and ooh, look at this. Same values from last time. So things actually got worse. So I have a feeling that maybe, just maybe, these controls might work now, or at least work better. So let's go to blue first. Actually, let's do this. Let's do this. Now that those levels are reset, let's take another scan. We might be worse, we might be better. A little better. Blue's not as undersaturated. It's still way too bright. Red's a little over, better than being a little under, and still too bright. Magenta oversaturated, still a little bright. So yeah, it still have some work to do. Blue's still the worst, so we're still going to start with blue. Now it is too bright. It's not as bright as it was, but it's still too bright, and looks like the hue is off a little bit, and maybe it's just undersaturated just a little. We're going to start with the luminance first. That's the most important thing to get right here. On any primary color, luminance is most important. So if you have to concentrate on anything, concentrate on that. Go to the color tuner, find blue, and then find brightness control. Now again, the menu's on the screen, so taking readings while the menu's on the screen is kind of pointless. We're just going to guesstimate here. Now let's go -6. Now I'm looking for this blue bar in the luminance graph to drop down to 0. Ooh, it dropped down, just dropped down a little too far. So 7 clicks was maybe a little too aggressive. Let's go -4 instead. And it is getting a little brighter with my eyes, so that's a great sign. Boom, look at that. Almost perfect luminance. Now that we have the luminance much better, the error drops from like a 5.4 to a 2.7, which at this point is kind of, considered within tolerance. How picky I'm being and how much time I'm willing to spend, we might be able to make some improvements here. Since one of my biggest questions about this firmware update was fixing the CMS system, I'm curious if the other controls work just as well. So let's continue with blue, and let's try the hue. That's pretty far off. So let's take the blue hue control. I'm just going to go up 3 clicks. Now I'm going to watch this delta H graph. Hopefully it drops. If it gets worse, I think I just went in the wrong direction. And it got worse. So wrong direction, no big deal. So instead of 3, let's go -3. And better. But it did affect the luminance a lot. So let's see if we can get a nice balance here of everything. Let's go on the hue. Let's go 2 more clicks. And I am seeing it with my eyes get darker as you change the hue, which is not quite right, but we might be able to balance everything out here. Okay, the hue's much better. The luminance is way worse. The saturation's way worse. So let's see if we can fix it. The hue control should just take blue a little bit more towards red or a little bit more towards green. And it might be doing that a little bit, but it's also affecting the luminance and the saturation, when it in fact should just be controlling the color of blue. But yeah, that's okay. So now that blue is too dark, let's brighten it back up again. Back to, do it at +1. Oh, +1 was a little too much, so we're back to 0. And so +1 was a little too bright, -1's a little too dark. There's no half click, unfortunately, so we're just gonna have to live with that. No big deal. You see the delta error now is back to a 5.5, but look at where the dot is now. So we fixed the hue, which screwed up the luminance. We fixed the luminance, and now that screwed up the hue. So I'm about 50-50 on this working correctly at this point. Now it is quite undersaturated. Let's see if that control does anything. It's under, so let's turn it up. Let's just go 6 clicks. Let's just see what happens. Wow. Saturation didn't change much, but got a lot brighter. Which is starting to make me a little nervous now. Let's try to darken it again. Let's go 2 clicks. Ah, man, so much interaction here. That's better though. The luminance got better, the hue got better. Now it's just way undersaturated still. Now, ideally, guys, if you're adjusting the saturation control for blue, that should, if you turn it down, that should bring it in towards white. If you turn it up, it should bring it, more saturated out towards the edge of the triangle. That doesn't seem to be the case here. It seems to be if you adjust the saturation, it's also changing the hue. And it's also changing the luminance as well. So the controls are a lot more interactive than I'd like them to be, but let's see if we can make any use out of them. Let's turn up the saturation a little bit more. We're starting to run out of gas here. We're at 6, it only goes to 10. Let's see. Yeah, slight improvement on the saturation, but it did improve the luminance, and the hue is basically perfect now. The one thing that does make me a little scared is the fact that we turned the blue saturation all the way up to its max. I think it's at the full +10, right? So that might cause some posterization artifacts or maybe some color banding artifacts. How do we know? Let's look at a test image. Wow, okay, doesn't look bad. A lot of times what we'll see here is, you'll pull up an image like this after adjusting CMS. And in some cases, if it's a bad CMS system or you're cranking the controls way up or way down, all of a sudden you pull up this picture and the skin tones look all splotchy. The primary colors like the blue, the red, and the green shirts are all splotchy, and you can tell from a mile away if there's a problem. Now, with that major adjustment to blue saturation, I'm not seeing any posterization errors. I'm not seeing any banding errors. I'm not seeing any artifacts at all for that matter. So it seems that the controls are at least better than they were. Are they perfect yet? No. But let's continue on. What's the next color that's really whacked? Let's look at red. What's wrong with red? Red is too bright, a little oversaturated. The hue's pretty good. Let's fix that luminance error first. Don't forget to change to red. And let's find that brightness control, aka the luminance control. It's way too bright. So let's bring it down, let's say 5 clicks. Wow, and you can also, you guys can't see this on camera, but as I'm turning down the brightness, the red is getting more saturated, which makes sense, but let's see how much damage it caused. I'm expecting the red dot to go even further out and this bar to drop, but let's see. Wow, and boom, I was exactly right. The luminance is now good. Saturation's way out here. We've got a nice big saturation error. So maybe, just maybe, if we're real lucky here, I can turn down the saturation for red just a little bit and everything will just fall into place nice and easy. So let's just go down 2 clicks of red in saturation. Hopefully the dot moves in. It did, but it also got way darker. So again, we're back to this balancing act. Let's get the saturation under control if we can. Let's go down, yeah, maybe 2 more clicks. Oh, a little too much. Now we're kind of on the inside of the box, so those 2 clicks should have been just 1 click. Oops. Let's go one more. Wow, and this is a big difference too. You guys can see this on the camera too as well. Like 1 click in saturation is making a big visible difference. But again, when you only have a range of -10 to +10 for your adjustments, I'm not surprised that the clicks are very big between each other. All right, saturation's better. The hue's off a little bit. The big thing that's concerning here is the luminance. Now we're at a 2.3, sorry, we're at an 8.6 delta error because the luminance is way off. So hopefully I can get this under control. We can move on to the next color. I have a feeling though, when we raise the brightness, we're going to also affect the saturation. And it is doing that visibly. Let's see if this bar comes up and doesn't do anything else. So we brought the brightness up. It got a little bit brighter, but the saturation got even less. And the hue is even worse now too. So let's keep working on it. Just keep pounding on it. Okay. It's still too dark. Let's turn it up like 3 clicks. Now this is going to really desaturate it. Let's put that back to 0. Okay, the saturation's better. It's still way too bright though. Man, it's like 1 click on the red brightness control is making such a huge difference. Let's also do this while I'm here and thinking about it. Let's put that contrast back to 43. Go down 1 click. Wow, 1 click. It's just slightly too dark now. So the overall error now is a 1.8. I feel a lot more comfortable with that. Hopefully the colors don't affect each other. They really should not, but you never know. We already worked on blue. Let's see if that's the same. And it actually got a little bit worse. So we might have a nice big balancing act here that we have to make, and that's okay. You know, the hope is that we do all this work and then the picture still looks good at the end. So let's go back to blue. Let's take that brightness control, bump it back up to 0. Okay, much better on the luminance, way worse on the saturation. So let's see if we can bump up the blue saturation a tad. Oh, it's already up as high as it can go. So I've hit a brick wall. Blue's just going to be undersaturated unless we really mess with the luminance. Just as an example, I lowered the brightness all the way, but it also heavily saturated blue. So I'm expecting this bar to drop way low, and I'm expecting the dot to move out closer to the target. And that's what happened. Now, you might be saying, okay, well, the dot's closer to the box now, so that should be good, right? Better than it was. No, not at all. Look at your luminance error now. It's huge. And blue is a primary color. If you mess up the luminance on the primary colors, you will have massive problems, especially in skin tones. So in some cases, and this might be one of those cases, if I get the luminance right, but maybe that means it's a little undersaturated, oh well. We've got to get the luminance right here on blue. Now, maybe, now that we're better on saturation, it's still not great, maybe I can raise the brightness back up a bit and at least get the proper luminance. Where were we at 0? Let's see. And you're back to just over 5. So let's go back and let's go down a click. Yeah, one click up is a little too high, one click down is a little too low. Red was a little too low. So if red's a little too low, I don't want blue to be a little bit higher. We're probably gonna have to drop green down a little bit too. So at least they're all the same amount of wrong, if that makes any sense. So let's go to green next. And we're already at a 1.9. It's a little oversaturated. The hue and the luminance are pretty close. Green might be pretty easy here. Let's just read it first to make sure. Okay, the luminance is quite a bit off. And it's too dark, so let's brighten that. I'm just gonna go 5 clicks, just a guesstimate. Oh, wow, look at that, good guess. So now red, green, and blue are at least the same luminance, right? It's still slightly oversaturated and slightly blue, but the overall delta error is a 1.5. How picky are you being? How much time do you want to spend? If I get the dot in the hole, is that going to make a difference to the picture? No, right? Because we're still within that 3.0 tolerance of a delta error. So if we were like 3.5, yes, I'd say let's do a little bit more work, but we're at a 1.5, which is really good. So let's move on and let's do magenta. Magenta is a big error, 3.7. It's a little more than we want. Way too bright and oversaturated. Now, I mentioned before with the primary colors, get the luminance right, then worry about everything else. On the secondary colors, we want to worry about the hue first, then worry about everything else. So if you notice, the hue for magenta is very good. It's at a 0.3 delta error. So that's good. I'm not going to mess with the hue at all. If the hue is off, the dot would be towards red or towards blue, but it's right in the middle of the box. It's just moving south, which means it's oversaturated. It's also too bright. So let's see if we can fix the saturation on the magenta. Now it's only off by a little bit. So I'm just going to desaturate it by 2 clicks. Ooh, it actually moved the dot left when it should have moved the dot up. Let's try, and also, wow, look at it, what it did to the luminance as well. So let's undo that. That's no good. And from here, we just need to brighten it a little bit. Let's just go 2 clicks. Oh, closer. Let's go 2 more. So really, it seems like the color management menu isn't perfect, but boy, is it better than last time. So I'm glad we redid this one. There we go. Bam, perfect magenta. Slightly oversaturated still. You can see that here, and you can see that in the graph, but the hue is perfect. And for a secondary color, that's most important. So that's good. Let's go on to cyan. How's it looking? A little too dark. Saturation's a little over, but okay. Hue is kind of like magenta, almost bang on. Let's see if we can brighten cyan just a smidge. Yes, that is a technical term, a smidge. Let's see. Color tuner and cyan. And let's brighten it by 4 clicks. Oh, not enough, but at least was in the right direction. Let's go 4 more clicks. And that's almost going to put us at the limit. So hopefully this does it. Boom, there we go. Okay, luminance is fixed. The overall, wow, this might be between cyan and magenta, these might be the two best. Well, actually yellow, wow. So we've got a 0.9 on cyan and a 0.7 on magenta. When you start seeing numbers below 1.0, that's the kind of accuracy we expect out of like a very, very expensive, $1,000 per inch, reference studio monitor. We're starting to see that these days in consumer regular TVs, which is good. The fact that this is a $500 or $600 TV and we can get some of these colors under 1, that's very, very impressive. Let's look at yellow. Just take a quick read. Yellow's a 7.6. How come? It's way too dark. The hue and the saturation are pretty good, so this might just be a quick fix on the luminance. Now it's way down, -30, so this is probably going to be, I don't know, 4 clicks. Let's try it. 4 clicks. Yellow, and take a read. Oop. It's going to be like cyan, I think, where it's more like 8 clicks. And there it is. Maybe we might be able to go 2 more. We've only got 2 more. So we might as well see if we can get it even better. I see it's already at 8. Let's go a full 10. And if this doesn't do it, we're just stuck with it. Ah, too much. Okay, so it was just 1 click. Great. Let's go back down to 9. And just take a quick read, and boom, there we go. Perfect luminance, very good saturation. The hue is off a little bit. We're at a 0.8. The yellow dot is kind of down towards red. This is, if it's something that's only going to take you a couple seconds to fix, I say fix it. So let's go into yellow, and we're going to go to the hue control. I don't know if we need to go left or right, so let's take some readings and at least see if we're going in the right direction. Okay, so to the right is the right direction. Now here's what's really, really interesting. And wow, you can see this on camera very easily. So right now the hue control is at 0. And on camera and with my eyes, it's a pretty nice looking yellow. It looks like reference yellow to me. I'm gonna turn the hue up 1 click, only 1 click. Watch how green it turns. Terrible, right? Now check this out. 1 click brought it from a little red to way too green. And I can see that green, it looks like a neon yellow to me now. It's very bizarre. If I saw a school bus that color, I would check to see what I ate for breakfast that morning, because it would not be right. So I'm very, oops, wrong button. I'm very cautious of that yellow hue control. In fact, I'm just gonna leave it at the factory position and just live with it. Now, again, we're still within a very, very tight tolerance anyway. I was just trying to clean up the graph a little bit, and it turns out that it wasn't worth it. That's okay. At least you tried, and now you know a little bit more about this TV. But it's just funny to me that the hue control in yellow is very aggressive, where the hue control with other colors is not. But these are things that if manufacturers hear this kind of feedback and really want to, make the customers real happy and things like that, then these are the kind of things that they'll fix. Okay, let's go through and just take one more reading of the entire color gamut, make sure we're all good and we're all happy with everything. And then we'll double check with some skin tones to make sure that we didn't cause any major damage here. So there's white, there's gray, red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow. Now let's look at our delta errors. Wow, what happened? Red went to a 5, green went to a 6.7, blue went to a 3.9. Guys, what happened to all of our good numbers? I have a feeling that certain colors are affecting other colors, which is not ideal. If I'm adjusting red, it should only change red, right? Let's take a moment. I'm just going to kind of predict this. And really the biggest problems is that all the colors are too bright now. We've got a big luminance error for red, really big luminance error for green. Blue's, not so bad, but still not good. Cyan's way too bright. Magenta's still way too bright. And yellow's way too bright. So these graphs and this delta L graph and the Gamut Luminance graph, both of those graphs are telling us the same thing. So it's got to be true, right? So let's just do this kind of quick and dirty. I'm going to start with red. Let's turn down the brightness, 1 click. Then we'll go to green. Turn the brightness down, 2 clicks. Let's go to blue and turn the brightness down, 2 clicks. And then we'll go yellow, 2 clicks. Cyan, let's go 3 clicks because it's a little worse. And then magenta, we'll also do 3 clicks. Now, let's see how good those guesses were. Not bad. Blue's now a 1.9. So the numbers are better. That means we're at least moving in the right direction. Oops, wrong menu. So we're going to go red, and 2 clicks didn't do it. So let's do 2 more. Green. We'll also do 2 more. Blue, we're leaving alone. Yellow. Let's come down 4 clicks. Cyan. Let's come down 4. And magenta, let's come down 2 more. All right. Okay, now we're looking a little better. 2.2, 2.3, might as well call it 2.3. 2.7 on green, 1.9 on blue, might as well say 2.1 on cyan, 2.6 on magenta, 2.9 on yellow. So we're under 3. Guys, I don't want to keep you too long here. I know we're getting close to actually we're a little over now. So if you guys do need to drop off, I totally understand. We don't have too much more to go. Feel free to hang out if you want to. I am recording this and we're going to put it up on YouTube later. So if you have to go, no problem. Thanks for hanging out this long. I'm going to move on. As you can see here, we probably could make a couple of other minor adjustments and really get these numbers way low. But now that everything's under 3, I'm pretty happy with it. And I will say that the controls do work much better than they did last time. Are they perfect? No, but are they a lot better? Absolutely. So I will definitely applaud Hisense for definitely making an improvement. Again, we're not looking for perfection here, guys. It's not going to be a perfect TV. None of them are perfect. Doesn't matter how much it costs. There's always going to be something about, something you're going to find. So the fact that this TV is this price, the color management kind of works. The grayscale is pretty flat. The gamma is pretty smooth. Not bad. Oh, I'm starting to see something funny already, though. May have spoken too soon. Look at blue. So this page is a saturation sweeps page. When we adjust the color gamut before with the CMS menu, we were only looking at 100% saturation for each color. Those were our targets, right? But what this page shows us is how well does that color track from no saturation, so white, all the way up to fully saturated. Now, what I really am concerned about here are straight lines, right? If we look at red, straight line, we're a little oversaturated, but that's okay. We tried to fix it, and we really couldn't. Magenta's the same way. It's slightly oversaturated in all these different spots. No big deal. But look at blue. The first shade of blue is way green. So is the second. So is the third. So is the fourth. But then look, blue down here, 100% blue, which was our target before, is the closest out of all of them. So this makes me very nervous because anything now that's blue is going to look more cyan, which, if you're looking at a sports jersey or, just something that's supposed to be blue, it's going to be wrong. So I'm going to take a quick stab at fixing this. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use 80% blue as my target to try to fix this. So down here in CalMan, I'm going to open up here. We're going to pick blue. And oh my gosh, it is super cyan. I can see it from a mile away. You guys can probably see it on the camera as well. Like there's fully saturated blue, which is still a little undersaturated. And then there's 80% blue. So yeah, it's a pretty big difference here. So I'm going to use 80 as the target. And what I want to try to do here is pull the dot over towards red a little bit more. So this is going to be a hue thing. So I don't know which direction to go. So let's go to blue and find the hue control. And let's put it back to 0, back to factory. And wow, there was a big change even with my eyes. Okay, so wow, it did pull it back over towards the target, but it ended up way oversaturated. So, oof, this is going to be a tough call to make. Would I rather it be wrong saturation or wrong color? That's just one of those judgment calls you have to make sometimes. Let's turn on the saturation. That'll probably help a lot. Let's go back down to like 3. Let's see if that dot scoots right back towards the target. And it does, much better. Much better. Okay, so that 80% is a lot closer to the target now. Let's just double check all of the levels of blue while we're here. So here's 20, which is the first dot. Better. Here's 40, second dot. Better. 60, third dot. We know 80 and 100. So, so before, the early saturation levels of blue curled out like this. When we fixed 80, it straightened up 20, 40, 60, and 80. But now blue is way over, way towards red. So you're not really going to be able to fix everything here. I mean, you could if you got real fancy and got a LUT box or a Lumigen or a Mad VR or something, but I think for a $500 or $600 TV, that might be a little overkill personally. But I think this is as good as we're going to get it for the time we're spending. Let's go ahead and move on. The color checker test is coming up here pretty soon. Let's just double check our brightness and contrast before we get that far. I have a feeling the color checker test is not going to be great, only because almost every single level is in some way, shape, or form a little wrong, if you will. Now I'm looking at the black level again. We checked this, way earlier, but we're checking it again because we're getting towards the end of the calibration here, and I can now see the bottom row of boxes, which means my black level is too high. We had it set at 54 and everything looked normal, but since then things have changed. So let's take that black level down to 50. Oh wow, you know what? This actually is way better. So before, remember, I had to sacrifice 17 to keep the background from turning gray. Since we've done all this work, I've got the brightness down to 52. It was at 54. I came down 2 clicks. The background is now black, and I can just make out 17. So where this was kind of iffy the first time around, earlier this afternoon, now it actually looks proper. So this is good. That's an improvement. I like it. Let's double check the contrast. I'm clipping right around 254, 253, which is great. It's about as high as you can clip. And none of the boxes look pink, green, or blue. I'm very happy with that. Let's move along. Let's recheck our luminance. Remember at the very beginning, we were around like 160 nits or so. Let's see if that's about the same. A lot's changed since then. We're about 180 now. So somehow we got a little bit brighter, you know, not the end of the world. If you were in a dark environment, maybe you're worried about this being a little bit too bright, turn the backlight down a little bit. Totally fine, not gonna hurt anything. Is 180 a little aggressive for a pitch black room? I'd say yes. I'll use my house as an example. I'm about 7 feet away from a 65-inch TV. My dark mode in SDR is set to about 125 nits, and in a completely dark bedroom at night, it feels perfect to me. If I go any higher than that, it does start to look bright, and if I go any lower than that, it starts to look really dark. So, you know, for me in a home, you know, casual viewer watching movies and discs and things like that, you know, 125, 150 is good. 180 is not the end of the world by any means. Again, you could fix this. Again, in a reference studio environment, if you're going like to the book and to a T, we should be about 100. So we're quite a bit brighter than we would if we were in a reference environment, but we're not in a reference environment, so I'm okay with this. In fact, it even tells you over here in CalMan, there's some recommendations. For a theater room, we want to be between 100 and 130. For a dim room, we want to be 170. I would call this a dim room. Again, I've got 2 screens in here and some light coming from underneath the door. And the fact that we're a little bit brighter than that, I'm happy, no big deal. Okay, now let's start taking some final readings, looking at some final images, and just really just making sure that we're happy with everything that we've done. And let's check the question box while I'm here. And oh, no questions. Okay, cool. So red's a nice straight line. Blue is now a straight line. Cyan, green, magenta looks like it's going to be a nice straight line. Yellow looks, you know, yellow looks pretty good. Okay. Next is the color checker. As I said before, I don't have high hopes for this, only because you can almost kind of predict what's going to happen. If you look at the saturation sweeps and you've got things like this going on, your color checker is not going to be good. If all of the dots were perfect, you know, then the color checker is probably going to look pretty nice. So I don't have high hopes for it, to be honest with you, but I'm sure it'll be, you know, close-ish. I sort of call this, I always refer to this as a torture test. So what's happening here, we've got a bunch of pre-configured patches here. And most of these patches are just going to be kind of standardized colors, colors you see in nature, skin tones, and things like that. So the test here is if the generator sends out this dark skin triplet, and then we measure that same color off the TV, is it the same color? And, you know, in a lot of cases, it's not. So if we have a delta error of, you know, in this case, let's pick out a big one. Here's a skin tone. It's 5D. If you ever look up that color patch, it's Pantone most likely. It is a 4.1 delta error. So basically what that means is the color coming in from the generator and the color coming off the screen are not the same. If they were, this delta error would be a 0 and the bar graph would all be squished down towards 0. Now here's the good news. We've got a couple of colors that are slightly over 3. You know, this purple's a 4. This green's a 3.9. This kind of cyan color is a 3.8. A couple of the skin tones are like 4s. But here's the good news. Overall, the average is under 3, which that's all we can ask for a TV like this. Again, consumer panel, not very expensive. You know, what's nice about this is at least it's consistent. If you had some really big spikes or really big dips, it'd be a little concerning. But the fact that it's kind of wrong the same throughout the entire test is not the end of the world. And again, the average is a 2.8. You've got a couple colors over 3. It still should make a pretty nice picture. Okay, post-calibration settings. I'm not going to bore you guys with this. You know what to do here. If you're new to this or haven't seen this before, on this page is where you would write down or you would document all of your settings that you've come up with on the TV. So, you know, theater night for my picture mode, mid-low is my color temperature, 1886 is my gamma, 30 is my backlight, and yada, 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 yada. Down in the notes, you can put in your white balance adjustments. If you made any that were more than the 2 point at least, you can put all your color management adjustments, you know, what you did with local dimming and all those things down here. Let's just move along though. Now, last but not least, we're going to take a final reading of the entire TV. And then we'll look at a couple of test patterns and test images to make sure nothing looks strange. And we should be good from there. So really good grayscale. Again, it goes a little red towards the end, but it's still within tolerance. 315, 316, those are still within tolerance. Look at our primary and secondary colors. Pretty close, that's what we expected. Something, again, strange happened with blue, with the luminance. I don't know what happened here with blue. It just seems like those controls just must be super, super interactive with each other, and other colors are interacting with each other too, it seems like. So, you know, in a real world environment, I probably would go and lower the blue luminance just a little bit. Actually, you know what? It's only going to take a second. Might as well just do it with you guys here. We've been here this long. We might as well make this as best as we can. So let's take the blue brightness control. Let's come down like 2 clicks. And then let's read blue one more time. And yeah, it's better. You know, we're at least at a 3.5 now. Let's come down like 1 more click. And now blue, still 3.5. So again, it's close, guys. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over this. It's better than it was, which is nice. So one thing I am noticing, the gamma is not as good as it was, and this may have had something to do with that firmware update. If we go back and look at the beginning, when we calibrated last time, the gamma was slightly smoother, especially on the bottom end, right? But the white balance was off, and you know, we knew all these other things. So if we're looking at the end here, it's not bad. You know, it wasn't bad to begin with, and it wasn't bad the first time we did it in August. We found some quirky things with the controls. We weren't able to get certain things dialed in. It seems to me that the controls are a lot better. Still some quirkiness going on, but this is still a good calibration. The next thing I want to look at here, you know, graphs are graphs and test patterns are test patterns, but what do actual real world images look like? So we'll look at some skin tones. This is a great pattern to really see a lot of different things. You can see the different skin tones. You can see the different primary and secondary colors. You can see dark detail down here in his jeans. You can see dark detail in their hair. The sharpness is correct because remember when we were looking at the sharpness before and it was making all those halos and ringing artifacts around the lines? On this test pattern, if the sharpness is too high, these people have these lines around them and they look like cardboard cutouts, and it's really, really strange. But they have nice, smooth, soft edges. That all looks good. The grayscale background looks neutral gray. That looks really nice. I might want to take a look at maybe 1 or 2 more images just to be on the super safe side. I like to look at the grayscale pattern. There's no clipping going on. There's no crushing going on. It's neutral gray. That all looks nice. I also like to look at a ramp to make sure there's no color banding or no banding at all, period, because you can look at this ramp in different colors and in gray like we're looking at now. If there were banding artifacts in here, you would see that the black to gray to white transition is very, very smooth. If there were banding artifacts, you would almost see teeny tiny little bars instead of a nice smooth transition. So very, very obvious, but I'm not seeing it with my eyes, so I'm happy with that. And then we might want to, here's the other ramps just in case if you wanted to see those, but those all look nice. And then maybe one last look at the geometry pattern. Sharpness looks good, aspect ratio looks good. I'm happy with this. This looks really good. So from here, we can report it. And this is the report that we can, we can give to the client. Say, hey, here's where it was, here's where it is now. In this case, there was a little bit of a drift over time. The firmware did fix a couple of things. It's not perfect by any means, like I mentioned before, but it is a lot better. So I'm very happy with this. Now, the other thing I want to do is check the question box, see if you guys have any other questions. Let's get this ISF report loaded up, because that's the workflow that we used. And now we're going to generate and look at all the final numbers and graphs. So as we scroll down, we see the equipment that was used. We see the before and after settings, which we didn't really fill anything in here. So those are blank. And then we have our grayscale before and after. The gamma before and after, at least average to about a 2.2, which, for a room with some ambient light in it, not the end of the world. I probably would have been a little closer to 2.4, but that's just me. Delta errors on the grayscale. We were a little over a 6. Now we're about 5.5. Some of the levels got a lot better. Some of the levels actually got worse. And here's why. It's because of the gamma. So look at the gamma before. Level 10 was right where it was supposed to be. So we had a really low delta error. Now the gamma is way off. So we have a big delta error. So this big delta error at 10% is not because it's not gray. It is gray. We see it here. It's neutral gray. It's because the luminance is so far off. So even though it's the right shade of gray, it's too bright. So it's causing this big error. Color gamut, it's about the same. If not, it could have been actually a little bit better before. I mean, look at the delta errors. Red was a 1.3. Now it's 2.4, So even though a lot of these are still within tolerance, and again, we did notice that a little bit more tweaking, we probably could have made a little bit of improvement. But again, I don't want to keep you guys here all day. But overall, pretty good. The picture's probably going to look a little different, especially that the grayscale is fixed. We might have a slightly different look now when we look at things like, horror movies and stuff, because the dark detail is going to be a little bit brighter. But overall, guys, for the price of this TV, the amount of time we've spent with it, it's not that bad. So any questions? Let me open up the question box. And gosh, no questions. So guys, that's all I've got for you today. Feel free, in the next 24, 48 hours, this will be up on YouTube. If you didn't watch the first video, that's on YouTube now. You can go back and watch and kind of see how we progressed to this point. But this will be recorded. I'm sorry, it has been recorded. It'll be posted later if you want to go back and revisit. If you don't want to spend the 2 hours re-listening, I just found a recent a little trick with YouTube. It's probably been there forever. I just found it for the first time. But they have a variable speed setting in YouTube now. So sometimes if these long webinars, if you don't have time for them, I'll crank up the speed to like 1.2 or 1.5, and they go by a lot faster. So feel free. If you have any questions for me, it's jason@murideo.com. Thank you guys so much for hanging out for a little over 2 hours. I know it's a long session, but it's a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys maybe picked up a couple tips and tricks. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. I don't see any other questions, so that'll be it for the day. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.